Hi, this is Robert from Lounge Audio. Welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to talk about RCA Victor records and how they created the very first remasters ever. And then we'll do a postscript on Enrico Caruso. Let's get started. In 1948, Columbia released the first LP. This was seen as a medium, the LP, to be used for classical music exclusively. Of course, later on it was used for everything, but initially, the whole timing of the LP, how much time could be put on one side, and the whole LP itself was targeted towards being able to capture a whole classical music performance with as little interruption as possible. Of course, before then, people stacked up 78s. And so pieces were cut into sections as the 78s dropped down. So the LP was a big step towards being able to play a classical piece without interruption or only one interruption. But what Columbia did is they were releasing stuff that was current performances. So finally, in 1950, RCA, of course, if you see my earlier video, is trying to use the drop-down 45 as their main medium. They finally go in and they make their first LP. What did they do? They took Columbia's thing of having the LP doing classical music and even went a step further. They had the LP only doing their vintage performances. These are performances that they acquired through buying through buying Victor Records, which becomes RCA Victor. So that's RCA Victor Records. So they go through their vast archive of performances going back to 1904 to make what becomes the very first remasters. This is not just a reissue or a medium transfer from one format to another. It's an actual remaster, and it's the first time that this happened. So what they did they decided to call this the Treasury of Immortal Performances. And so the thing was run by two guys mainly, George Marek and Albert Pully. So George Marek is the director of A&R for RCA Victor. And he was a prolific writer. He wrote a lot of books as an author. Also, you see all these LPs behind me, all these beautiful color LP covers. Well, back before George Marek got the idea to make all these covers, this is what stuff looked like that RCA was issuing. Pretty drab. So all these colorful covers, that's George Marek's idea. It's pretty major stuff. And anyway, so he goes through as the, looking at the repertoire of all these old, discs that they have. And they pick out from approximately 7,000 discs. They whittle everything down to performances they want to reissue as far as the musical content. Then, Albert Pully, very, very highly respected engineer. Okay, his title is Administrator of Sound Engineering, RCA Records Division. You'll see his name all through the 50s if you go and Google him, but he was very highly respected. And he was at one time president of the Audio Engineering Society. Also, if you watch my prior video, he was involved in those very early Sapphire Group meetings in New York in the early 40s. So Albert Pully, managing his department, took all those, the metal masters that George Marek and his group of people picked out. And they went through everything with basically a fine-tooth comb. Now, you got to understand, this is a physical medium, and back then, the grooves on a 78 type master were much wider than the micro grooves on an LP. So they're working on all these 78 masters, and the first thing they have to do is go in and clean all of them up. And that's more like jewelry work than it is like electronic processing. They're going through with magnifying glasses and microscopes and doing work more like an engraver would do, or a jeweler, polishing little areas, finding little places in the metal masters and cleaning them out. So once they did all that, then the metal masters go off to the electronic processing part. And there, what they did is they transferred everything to the new medium, which is magnetic tape. This is 1950. Magnetic tape was only about 3 or 4 years old at that point in the United States. They transferred everything over, and then from there they edited everything down. They took some multiple performances and were able to edit them together for the first time. They could go in and splice out little imperfections, short spaces, a very narrow width of tape that contained maybe a pop they couldn't get rid of on the metal master. They would splice those out. So this is the first time that all this stuff could be compiled together in a way to make an LP from, and also in a way to clean up everything that you were stuck with on the metal masters. So this is remastering here going on. Also, they even went on into the world of remixing or overdubbing. Also, they took some things that were done, solo pieces or pieces that were deemed too thin in the orchestration, as far as maybe a piece that just had a violin and a piano or something. They actually added in orchestra accompaniment to those pieces to fill them out. Now, this had been done once before with Enrico Caruso back in let's see, when was that? Back in 1932, they had a process called voice grafting. They took Enrico Caruso's solo voice performances and they played those things up against a live orchestra at the time, and then added orchestration and reissued everything like that. So that RCA also did this in 1950. So everything that they do creates this whole body of these tape masters that they can then go and issue records off. So the initial issues of those, of course, RCA Treasury of Immortal Performances. Now, not only did they press this to LP, but they also press it to their 45 format, and that'll be interesting later in a little bit. I'll tell you about that. So anyway, they also go on a little bit later in the series to re-release and remaster swing, blues, jazz, and folk records. So when you go to Discogs and you look at Immortal Performances series, you'll see actually in the beginning, you'll see stuff like Lionel Hampton and all that. For some reason, that comes up on the list first. But you look in there, you see all the classical stuff. So this was a pretty major deal. This is a big re-release of all this archival material. A lot of this has to do with Enrico Caruso. I'll go through that a little bit in a second. So anyway, then, now get this, okay? You got the LP and you got the 45 running in tandem at RCA, and they do this special pressing of the 45 format of all this Immortal Performances, and they have these women you see in this picture. You have Enrico Caruso's wife, opera singer Rosa Poncel, and John McCormick's wife. They're handing off, holding some little box sets. They almost look like the large package CDs that we used to buy in the late 80s, early 90s. They're handing these off to Dr. Luther Evans, who's the Librarian of Congress. No LPs in sight. So that's what they're handing off for the Librarian of Congress to supposedly archive, forever. Not handing him the LPs, which is going to become the format very soon that everybody's going to buy everything on. Nope, they hand off, they're still steadfast, holding up the 45 as the standard. This is RCA's part of The Emperor Has No Clothes. They're going on and doing this. I don't know if they ever handed off some LPs to Dr. Luther Evans later on, but the picture they show has got the 45s. So anyway, so this is the initial effort ever to do true remasters of something. Of course, RCA later on goes and picks up current performances, and that's, you see Rubinstein and especially initially Toscanini. Those are all current performances or very recent performances. But these first remasters were all stuff done in 1904 to 1937. So now we're going to go on to Enrico Caruso. A lot of this was driven by Enrico Caruso, who of course died in the early 20s, but he was so prolific, and he was a monster. You can compare him to Elvis Presley, Michael Jackson, any of the top tier performers that we in the 21st century would know about. He essentially created the legitimacy of selling music on a record. And of course, in the beginning, it was a cylindrical disc, and later on it became a 78. But before him, most people that were considered high-minded music people, which of course would have been classical music, it would have been opera and primarily, and then other classical pieces below that, but primarily opera. The people that ran in those circles looked initially at the Edison cylinder disc as a toy. Enrico Caruso did not see it that way. He saw the future of this, so he went with it, and he's got a great voice, singing through it, pushing through that horn and everything. And so he's making money. I mean, when you go and look at the amount of money he was paid back then, we're talking about around World War I and earlier, it is astonishing how much money. Just to give you an example, he was making 40 cents per release for a period of time during his life that was sold out in the stores at that time. 40 cents. Go to the inflation calculator and type in 40 cents from approximately like 1910 and see how much it's worth today. It's a lot of money. So through the 1920s, the 1930s, the 40s, the 50s, he was a big reissue, and then RCA found out a big remastering success. And I can show you, even as late as the late 50s, early 60s, you have this album here, 60 years. Enrico Caruso is mixed in here with performances by other people from this initial remastering effort, and also current performers, or much more current performers. And so anyway, by the way, this was owned by a DJ from KBIG. This is a thrift store buy, of course. So, you know, you can see how Enrico Caruso was the big driving force for wanting to go in and do these remasters, because they knew once they had him able to be reproduced easily on a large LP format, that they would sell a lot more records, because people just love this guy. My grandfather had Enrico Caruso records. He loved them. So anyway, I have only one Immortal Performances LP that I happened to buy at a thrift store. And when the credits roll, this is what we're going to play for you. It's Rachmaninoff's Immortal Performances, his Piano Concerto No. 2 in C minor. This was recorded in 1929, remastered in 1950, released in 1951 with the initial release of Immortal Performances. We'll play it for you during the credits, and believe me, it'll sound like it was recorded in 1929. So that's it for RCA and the very first remasters ever. My name is Robert. Thank you for watching the Lounge Audio channel. If you enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe. If you have any comments, please leave them below. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate your support. We sell analog phono preamps. Please see the links below for the different models.